This is the Picard podcast on TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about Star Trek Picard, Season 3, Episode 7, Dominion.
Only the real Tuvok would know we played Calto, which means he must have told you. The hell have you done with him?
All I can tell you is, when we are done with him, when we are done with all of you, death will come as a relief.
Relays are almost down. If I can't kill this signal soon, they're gonna find us.
Where is Will Riker? Is he alive?
Me, Admiral? I'm as good as dead. Just like you.
Geordi!
Disconnecting.
Welcome back, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, to the Picard podcast on TV Podcast Industries. Yes, we're on to episode 7 of season 3, Dominion. And I am one of your changeling hosts, John? Maybe?
That's a big reveal. I'm your other host, Derek. I'm not a changeling. Or I would say that, of course.
Of course.
Even if I was.
We need the trust questions from 7 of 9.
Yes. If we are changelings, is that why Chris is not here?
Well, he is a bit like Janeway, Admiral Janeway. He is doing a lot of preparation at the moment.
I see.
So,
yes. Good stuff.
Or has he gone to ground? Who knows?
He may have. Yes, Chris, unfortunately not here for this episode, but we'll be back for our 8th episode of Star Trek Picard. So just me and John chatting about this one.
Yes. Welcome to TV Podcast Industries. Remember, you can get the podcast on any Federation or Changeling supporting podcast player of your choice. You can head on over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com. As well, we love to get your thoughts on each and every episode of Star Trek Picard. So you can leave a voicemail over at our website, tvpodcastindustries.com, or send in your emails at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com.
Absolutely. Or you can join our Facebook group on facebook.com/group/TV Podcast Industries, where we have a spoiler post up for every show that we're covering. We've just finished 2 other shows in the last week.
We certainly have, yes.
Finished up The Last of Us, announced our winner of our Last of Us World's End pub quiz, which was Kevin Coyle. Congratulations, Kevin.
Yes, congratulations again, Kevin. Great stuff. And of course, a reminder that the 7th question in our Picard 10 Forward pub quiz will be coming up later in our episode. And of course, the other reminder here is to gather all your 10 answers to the pub quiz questions at the end of the season and email them into us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, where you'll be in with a chance of getting your hands on some Star Trek Picard goodies.
Exactly. And we did also finish another podcast this week. We've ended our time in a galaxy far, far away with Star Wars The Bad Batch Season 2 with an excellent, epic, double episode close out.
Amazingly good. Yeah.
Really, really good. Yeah, absolutely loved how that series closed out. The last 5 episodes particularly were really, really good. But I think that's enough of the other podcasts we're doing. Let's hop into our discussion about Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 7, or Chapter 7, Dominion.
Yes, before we get into our spoiler-filled discussion, Derek, what are some of the episode details for Episode 7?
Well, the series was created, of course, by Akiva Goldsman, Michael Chabon, Christian Bale, and Alex Kurtzman. The story for this episode was written by Jane Maggs. This is her 5th episode of Picard, and also wrote Episode 3 this season.
Excellent stuff.
Director for this episode is Deborah Kampmeyer. Also did an episode of Discovery in the past, and will be directing the 8th episode of Star Trek Picard, Season 3.
Excellent stuff.
I never know how to say that now, because it feels like the show is just saying this is Picard Chapter 8. There are obviously some references to season 1 and season 2, but it is really saying this is just chapter 8 of Picard, or chapter 7 of Picard in this episode. So I'm never really sure how to call it out. Do we call it a season 3, episode 7? Which it really is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, but they're chapters of a story for this season.
Absolutely. It's kind of slightly apart, I think.
Yeah.
But there are some threads coming back in, I think, from the other seasons, at least season 1, I think. I mean, I guess the aromatic syndrome.
I was just thinking about that. It's like, well, we dealt with that in the first season, but actually we'll bring it back and deal with it in a different way in this season.
Yeah.
But, John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis of Star Trek Picard, Chapter 7, Dominion?
Sure. On the run from Starfleet, the Titan hides amid the Chintoka scrapyard as Worf and Raffi take La Sirena out on an intelligence mission. Deciding on their next move, Geordi works against Law's persona to restore Data's dominance of the android's mind, so they can get more information on the Changeling's plans, and 7 of 9 contacts her former crewmate Tuvok to build allies against the looming threat. But Tuvok fails 7's trust test, revealing himself to be a changeling and leaving the real Tuvok's fate ambiguous. With seemingly nowhere to go and time ticking down to Frontier Day, Picard, Beverly and Geordi surmise that the changelings are using his corpse to use his genetics to infiltrate Starfleet's anniversary celebrations. They devise and enact a plan to trap Vadic and her crew on the Titan with force fields, using Jack Crusher, who is developing telepathy, and Sidney LaForge as bait. Capturing Vadic, Picard and Beverly interrogate her. Vadic is defiant, telling them that Starfleet's antidote during the Dominion War was withheld, and in fact the changelings needed to steal it to reverse the effects of the genocidal virus. She also reveals that she was one of 10 changelings whom Starfleet doctors tortured and experimented on at Daystrom Station to develop a breed of super spies. Radicalized by the experience, Vadic swore revenge on her escape and formed the rogue changeling faction, taking her torturer's form. Beverly confirms the experiment's existence and identifies a way of tracking these evolved changelings, while Picard realizes they may have to kill Vadic because of her singularly focused hatred and hostility towards the Federation. Meanwhile, Geordi fails to revive Data in time to stop Law from taking over the Titan's systems and disabling the force fields to introduce a little chaos onto the Titan. This allows Vadic's soldiers to attack Jack and Sidney, where Jack uses his telepathy with Sidney to control her attacks against the soldiers, while Vadic escapes and storms Titan's bridge, taking control and announcing she knows Jack's true nature.
Lower plus Vadic equals a massive villain for this season.
Yeah, and a lot of chaos as well.
Yep.
Yes, I loved Law in this.
Yes.
Really, really good. I guess he took the role, the skeptical role that has been filled by Captain Shaw in this, which I really enjoyed as well.
Absolutely. If you see these people walking around as self-proclaimed heroes, it does make you want to challenge them quite a lot. As
Indeed.
Antagonize them as much as you can.
But let us get into our points for this episode.
Make it so, number one.
Derek, what is your small moment from this episode?
Do you know, it's an old one, but a goodie. I don't know why, it just made me laugh every time when Vadic keeps calling the humans or the Federation solids, as they are a liquid species, a species that doesn't take any specific form for very long anyway. Since they are omni-species, I like that she kind of derogatorily calls them solids in the Federation because they can't change their shape. I don't know why. It just liquid versus solid just seems like a very funny term to call each other.
It sounds like an old people's home, though.
Maybe. Uh-oh.
Or a serious case of food poisoning.
Oh dear. All right. I didn't really mean you to go there, John. But I just really like that. It really made quite a difficult scene when she's explaining what actually happened to the changelings. It did make it quite funny when she was talking about them, because I think actually changeling itself, the term, was a derogatory term for the species that the Federation came up with. So it's nice to see they have their own derogatory retort.
Absolutely.
That's my favourite line from the
Good
episode.
stuff.
How about yourself, John? What's your small moment from the episode?
This is lore. I absolutely loved Brent Spiner here, switching betwing data and lore to data and back to lore again. I just thought it was just really, really good as Geordi and Picard are there at the start. So for me, it's it's where data comes in and says, I'm not on the Enterprise, the scimitar, and then it just gradually goes into lore, and where he says, then that would explain why you're so old. Time has been very cruel to you, Picard.
Harsh.
And it's like, again, you have this moment where it goes back to data and it goes, nor am I in complete control, and then switch to lore. It's just so good the way Brent Spiner does this. And he goes, in complete control of my utter revulsion at this ancient face. And of course you get this absolute skepticism, from lore, when you're exposed to these self-righteous, self-proclaimed heroes spewing vomit, a bit of arch, a little antagonizing flair is required.
Yes.
You really get the sense that he is no fan of the former crew of the Enterprise. Okay. And in fact, where he introduces his little bit of chaos by controlling the systems of the Titan, he does say, well, what do they say? My enemy's enemy is my friend. So, it's more than sure, absolutely. But again, I really like it when they come up against antagonists that really question, the
self-righteousness, I suppose.
The self-righteousness, but just the position of the likes of Picard or Beverly or Geordi, just the alternative view. I find it, I think it's really healthy for the Enterprise, because it is such, I said this before, it is such a great loving, and I love these, and they are heroes to me. But having the opposite view, I think, really grounds it rather than it just becoming sickly.
Well, what do they always say about a good villain is someone that believes that they're in the right, that what their plans are right. So you've got a character here like Laura, who's been thwarted a few times by this particular crew in his plans to do right. So he's looking at them kind of going, they say they're heroes, but they've challenged everything I've done. And,
and it's also to the point of, he is wanting his freedom, his life,
exactly,
in that sense. And of course, their allegiance is with data. And in this android form, they are competing.
Yes.
And it means, in a sense, snuffing out the existence of law. I mean, you have Picard actually saying, can we wipe law? And
I have to say, I love the reaction of LaForge there, where it's just kind of looking at Picard going, you don't understand this at all. It's like, this is more advanced than any android I've ever worked on. It's not just as simple as that. I may be able to put the barrier back up, but that's about the best I can do. A pretty bad daddy-daughter day with LaForge's daughter there, when she basically meets his best friend, Data, and he's slagging him off, saying that he's a self-righteous, self-proclaimed hero to her, effectively. So poor daddy-daughter day.
Yeah, exactly.
Good stuff. One of the other things about the scene that I just thought was quite interesting, effectively, Brent Spiner does such a great job switching between lore and data, but they mention here that B4 and Soong are just data files in the background. Their actual personalities haven't been fully formed here, so we won't see all four of them competing. A good way to make sure that poor Brent Spiner hasn't got to switch between all four different voices each time. So that's pretty good to do that. So he does such a great job with Laura and Data.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool.
But let us get on to our second point.
Implement the Omega Directive immediately.
Yes, our Omega Directive, our second point. What do you have, John?
Mine is Jack Crusher here. We see him effectively being able to hear other people's thoughts. In particular, the increasing sort of romantic persuasion that Jack seems to be having, as well as Sydney LaForge, with Jack, to Sydney. And, I really, you have that moment in the lift where he is able to hear her saying, I wish he would just tone it down a bit, because he's basically saying, come along to my pad that I've found. It's much bigger than just an ensign's quarters, and we can, I guess, see where it goes.
Yes.
And she says, oh, I wish you'd just sort of like touch my hand or something, just tone it back a bit. And he does that. And she looks at him, strangely, because it's like, why did you do that? She asks. And because she's just thought it. So at this moment, this element, that Jack can hear other people's thoughts. And I'm also guessing at this stage then, the red eye that he gets, they are not able to see this, because he is looking at her with the red glow in his eyes. And there is no mention of that. She doesn't call that out.
She probably would have called that out.
Yeah, exactly.
Much more so than, why did you touch my hand? It would be, hang on a second, why have you got Terminator eyes?
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's another little interesting sort of aspect to this scene. But later on then in the episode, again, we have something much more direct, but also a telepathy that goes beyond simply hearing other people's thoughts, but that Jack controls Sydney's movements after they've been trying to enact the trap to trap Vadic and her men that have come aboard. They end up being trapped with two soldiers sort of looking in, but when Lord pulls down those force fields, Jack gets the better of the soldier that's on his side, whereas Sydney is having a bit of a tougher time with, I think it's more the one that Sydney is fighting is Vadic's right hand changeling.
I think so,
here. And in the end, Jack is able to control Sydney's fighting in order to get the better of him, and she realizes she could sense him doing that, and looks at him with a little bit of trepidation here. But ultimately there's not enough time to really explore this, as they have to run away, as Vadic, who has also escaped with the systems coming down, is the whole purpose of them being there is to get Jack Crusher here, because we have because earlier we do have that moment where she has cut off her hand again and is speaking to this globulous form, where, they make it really, really clear the priority. You must get Jack Crusher. They need Jack Crusher.
Yes.
So that importance of him is absolutely on display. And now that we know the telepathy element, that this is where it could be important if the surmising by Geordi, Picard, and Beverly about why they stole the corpse of Picard from Daystrom, it might be to control the doppelganger more thoroughly.
Something like that, maybe. Does this explain the voices that he was hearing earlier on in the season? Was he actually reading the minds of Vadic and of Beverly Crusher?
It could be,
when we heard Beverly Crusher going, come back to me, which I want to touch on in a second as well. But you're right, this scene is really, really good. I have to give such props to whoever did the choreography for that scene. It must be so difficult to get two actors to move in exactly the same time.
It's like synchronized diving or something like that in a sense. So it must
have taken such a long time, but I know it's a quick scene, but it works really, really well to see him being in full control of somebody else's body. It must be very, very freaky, but looks fantastic on screen. Great job.
Yeah, so really good. That's my medium moment.
More intrigue on Jack now. We're 7 episodes into the show. I do like that the episode ends with Vadic going, it's time for you to learn your true nature now.
Well, exactly.
So we will hopefully see in episode 8 what that's going to be.
I hope so.
Because one of the things that was missing in this episode, last episode ended with the revelation that Riker and Troy were taken by Vadic, and in this episode, weirdly, it was just a kind of a note saying we didn't break Troy or Riker when she's having that conversation with the entity, the face or the voice. But we didn't see them in this episode at all. I really expected with that cliffhanger ending we'd see them in this episode. But I'm sure we'll see more of them for the rest of the season because they can't leave it there, really.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Derek, what's your medium moment here?
Mine's kind of connected with that closing out of the episode, because this episode begins with the investigation as to what could have happened to Riker. We see that Seven has reached out to her former compatriot aboard the Voyager, where we have Tuvok here on screen.
Great. Really great seeing Tuvok. Yeah,
really cool seeing him on screen. I like that they really play with us here. We saw in the last episode that all of those Easter eggs of all the ships, or the episode before, all the ships that we saw, and we had the theme of Voyager playing when Seven is telling her story about the family that she made there. So she's reached out to one of her closest members of that crew, which was Tuvok, trying to find out, does he know anything at all about where Riker could have been? But I really like just the setting of this, because it looks like Seven is sitting in the captain's chair and there's nobody else aboard, but everybody's off to the side away from the view screen. So, investigating the voice of Tuvok to make sure it matches the real Tuvok's, file voice effectively, and it becomes inconclusive. So, so Seven has to interrogate even more and tries to make this connection with him through their history together playing Calto, the game that they played multiple times before. And Tuvok passes that, this version of Tuvok at least passes that test by saying, "Oh, you beat me many times, during that game." But only when she mentions the place that they would go to meet up, does it turn out that this isn't the actual Tuvok. She does the other test on him effectively. So she realizes that this isn't Tuvok. This is a changeling who's taken him over. But interestingly here, we've mentioned a few times, changelings can take the form of anybody, but she finds out that Tuvok has actually been interrogated to find out that information about their relationship. So he's clearly in a very bad way. He's clearly been kidnapped by the changeling so they can make an even more realistic version of him, not just impersonate his face. They're also trying to get all of the information that they can out of it, which is really interesting. They're really worried about what could be happening to Riker as well. Yeah. And this Tuvok changes into Riker. I love that scene. Riker looks really, really deathly in this.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he? It does almost look like a death mask of some description. Really pale, kind of trauma sort of bleed lines under the surface of the skin almost. Really good. So we do kind of see Will Riker in this episode, but not the real.
We just see this version of Will Riker, and we kind of hear from the changeling that the reason why he looks like this, that everybody will suffer under the changelings. They will be putting them all under this type of trauma, and they'll all wish for death before it's over, is the phrase that he uses. Just want to touch on one other thing that he says when Seven is asking where Admiral Janeway is. The explanation that's given from this changeling, from Tuvok changeling, is that she's much more concerned about setting up this Frontier Day celebration. She's got so much responsibility there, so she's off the table at the moment. She's really taken up with all of her responsibilities there. But I did have to question that, because this is a changeling. So is he saying Admiral Janeway is taken up with that? Does he know? Or has she gone to ground? Is she missing? Are they trying to find her? Because surely she would be a very good changeling replacement, right? Admiral Janeway, since she's head of the whole of the Frontier Day celebrations.
It is the interesting part here, I think. Has Admiral Janeway been compromised and is actually a changeling, and that's why she's not returning any of these reach outs that Seven of Nine has done? Or, I kind of, in the back of my mind, I feel with Janeway, in a sense, she might know. And whether that's because of possibly some interaction with Ro Laren and taking that seriously, whether she's got, as you say, gone to ground. So and to me that kind of feels Janeway.
It does.
To me. But you just don't know with this situation.
Exactly.
So it's a really good kind of conundrum that's brought in, you know, what has happened to Admiral Janeway.
Yeah, like the other concern is that maybe she has been captured, but they
Exactly.
haven't broken her yet to make the changeling that they need to ensure that she passes all these kind of tests effectively. Because everybody knows Admiral Janeway, everybody has a very close relationship with her. You probably very quickly realize that a changeling's there. They thought they could cover up for Tuvok because they've it's seemingly tortured him to get information out of him. So maybe Janeway hasn't broken yet.
Yeah, which would also be very Janeway.
Very, very Janeway.
Yeah, exactly. I think the final thing on this is it's almost a bit like with Brent Spiner. I loved how Tim Russ just changed there as 7 of 9, you know, calls out that he's a changeling.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just goes, you know, in a sense, evil. So I really like that. I just think it's so good when you see actors sort of taking on those multiple personalities and characters of different forms. It's almost a bit like with Moon Knight and the difference between Moon Knight, Mott, Spectre, Steven, and so on. All these different behaviors and characters and how they portray that. So I really enjoyed that element of where Tuvok switches. It was really good.
It must be so much fun for actors to come back to their roles and told
Definitely.
you have to play it like you used to play it, but you could also get to play a different version of that character as well. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think that's it for my Omega Directive, my medium point. Shall we go on to our Prime Directive?
Yes, our major point.
We must face the ramifications of the Prime Directive.
So, John, what's your big moment from the episode?
My main point is, you know, Starfleet were not the saints that we thought they were from the Dominion War. I really liked this. I loved this interplay between Vadic, Picard, and Beverly Crusher here when she's captured between the force fields, because, you know, we get to hear that maybe the history of Starfleet, of the Federation, of what they did during that period, is the history of the victors, in a sense. It's not the reality. It's not the truth, which Picard and Beverly thought it was, which is that, yes, they employed this virus to attack the changelings,
which is pretty brutal in itself.
But the known history for the Federation is that they also provided the antidote. Whereas Vadic is quite clear here that the antidote was never given freely, never given willingly by Starfleet to the changelings during the war, that it had to be stolen for them to use it. And, you know, it links really nicely, I think, to a number of different moral conundrums or discussions or ethical considerations that are being had here by Beverly and Picard, you know, earlier in the episode, where Beverly is also still thinking about some kind of biological solution to these evolved changelings.
How to find them.
And how to find them. And that, but targeting a species based solely on biology is tantamount to genocide. And this ultimately comes back in this moment with Vadic, where she's really saying that Starfleet had a genocidal program against them because they didn't give the antidote, as is taught in the Federation from their history. So I loved this, and I loved how that makes Vadic's position, you know, when you think of that, you go, there's an understanding of why she is how she is, which is, as Picard's, you know, has been hugely radicalized by this.
Yes.
But not only that changelings were taken by Starfleet and tested on, effectively tortured, through the experiments to develop this super spy that is able to take that form, can pass all the tests and protocols that have been put in place since then to form this super spy. And so, you know, again, it's it's just, it's the questioning of the previous understanding of the Dominion War and Starfleet and the Federation's role in that.
Yeah.
But even with Picard's discussions where he sees possibly that, do they have to ultimately kill Vadic here because she is so far down the road of hatred, vengeance, reprisals, effectively, that she cannot be changed. And you hear again that, she is going to destroy the Federation. You will be looking for mercy, death will come as a release when we have, implemented what we intend to do. And you have this discussion between Picard and Beverly, but, she's still our prisoner.
Yes.
Are we undermining everything that we have stood for previously? And it's that real crossroads situation here. And I loved how this all sort of played out here, as Beverly and Picard are, questioning, interrogating Vadic here, and you get Vadic's motives and her retort to what they think is, being the good guys, effectively. And it seems like Starfleet maybe, is not that squeaky clean, angelic organization, or wing of the Federation. I guess I'm mixing them up here because there is the Federation.
Yeah.
And Starfleet is effectively their military and exploratory side.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I wasn't 100% sure whether what Vadic was saying was that they never provided the antidote to the entirety of changelings, or whether her experience as she had been captured and tested on at Daystrom was that they didn't get the cure, that they were being tested on by Section 31 and then stole it so that that group of changelings got the cure. So I wasn't 100% sure about that, but it does throw a lot of concern on what Starfleet would have done and what they did.
Absolutely. I took it that the experiments on Daystrom were separate to this whole thing. Because it was really, they were experimenting around their physiology and their ability to be fluid and to change.
Yeah, exactly. And it is really concerning that they would try to do that and turn them into spies for this organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this was a real meaty sort of aspect of this episode, which I really, really enjoyed. And I think Amanda Plummer just pulled it off with aplomb.
With aplomb, very good, very good. She is great in this.
She is really good.
A true kind of vindictive side or vengeful side to her. Really for what they've done to her and her group. She even says at one point that I watched all of my family die, and now you'll watch yours die.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that experience, you can see her point of view. Again, is that the truth? We don't know. I'm hoping that they really explore this, because we have that moment earlier on where Shaw also, when Picard quite, in a sense, almost flippantly says, but we provided the antidote. But Shaw, does also make the point, but not before radicalizing a whole range of changelings here to another cause, effectively. So, this is this really sort of tickles the foundations of Starfleet and the Federation here.
Yeah. Going to be an interesting Founders Day celebration Starfleet and the Federation. If there's an entire race like this wanting to wipe them all out, right?
Absolutely, and it really links in with how history is portrayed from the victor's side, and that things that were fairly brutal, especially during wartime, whatever the situation, are maybe kind of pushed to the side, and it's more the triumphant, glorious, or
of course,
the those ethical or moral reasons why war was originally undertaken as to why. And this feeds into, I guess, history in general. I think this is really good because, I get it. the ideals of the Federation or Starfleet are absolutely great, and I love them. But that's not to say that it would always be like that, because I know, a lot of the things around Section 31 or even Discovery have come under a bit of a microscope for kind of maybe portraying Starfleet in not necessarily a glorious light. So,
well, absolutely. Now, I know there are a whole rake of Star Trek fans who hate the idea of Section 31, even that idea that there's a shadowy organization behind Starfleet, because Starfleet was created, this exploration group, this caravan train going throughout the stars. They were created to be aspirational, to be a group of people, of humans all working together with alien species. It's supposed to be aspirational for everybody. I know the tendency for this particular group of writers going back to the late 90s, this particular group of writers is putting in antagonists and putting in people that tear down the ideals of Star Trek and Starfleet. So I know there's a huge group of fans that hope they don't go very hard on this idea. Maybe this will be a misunderstanding that Vadic didn't realize that, or that the cure for the virus was actually given. Even the idea of Starfleet creating a virus in the first place has always caused problems for a lot of Star Trek fans. But hey, that's why we've got a story that's been going on for 60 years, right? There's always going to be changes to bring in other audiences. So it is a really interesting story for me. I'm not one of those Star Trek fans that clings to things having to stay the same all the time. I want to have new stories. I want to have those interesting concepts that are brought into these stories as well. So
absolutely. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as saying tear down the ideals of the Federation or Starfleet. I think they are the ideals of it, but it's recognizing the fact that in all walks of society, there are competing interests. I mean, it's even between the species within Star Trek that there are different interests, and that's how it was originally portrayed. Those different types of interests that's why the Romulans were, because they were warmongers, was the Federation. It was about peace and exploration and the Prime Directive. So they've just shifted where these stories are done, and it's looking inward at the Federation and Starfleet with these different competing interests, which will always be a natural form of doing it. So I kind of really enjoyed this, for sure.
Yeah, me too. Great story coming out of this. Good stuff. That's your big moment for the episode?
It certainly is. It is big. Derek, what's yours?
Mine might be a little bit smaller, but it does slightly resolve the one of the things that's been under investigation for the last couple of episodes. What was going on at Daystrom? Why did they steal Picard's body? I think I actually mentioned last episode that my suspicion was that they couldn't just create Picard and try and replace him, that there had to be some reason to why they needed Picard. So we find out here that they are trying, or at least the speculation is that they are trying to replace Picard because they had prepared for this almost. Picard was supposed to have a big involvement in the ceremony itself, and they'd already created some blockers to ensure that it is definitely Picard because he has to be genetically exactly the same as Picard. So even though they can replicate him, they can look more human, they don't have the DNA inside them, which we heard earlier on this season. So it seems like they're trying to use the body to create a replacement Picard and look exactly the same as him. The speculation that the reason why they need the body of Picard and Jack is because the two merged together would give an even closer replica of Picard. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
And the other piece that comes out as well is returning to aromatic syndrome. Now, if you didn't watch the first season of Star Trek Picard, it actually quite heavily dealt with this aromatic syndrome. The syndrome that came out back in the original days of The Next Generation that would eventually kill Picard, and we saw that in season 1. He did eventually die due to this aromatic syndrome, and his body has been replaced. So that's why we have this version of Jean-Luc in the Picard show. But now they're saying that when the body was under investigation by the changelings, that they have discovered that there's an anomalous form inside Picard. Lore explains this, saying that it's a perfectly imperfect version of Picard.
Yes.
So what I think that means is that they can't replicate Picard because he is not a traditional human, because he has this anomalous form inside him. There's no way that they can replicate that. And finding out earlier on in the season from Beverly that Jack has aromatic syndrome means that that's why they need his DNA. So they can't just take a straightforward example of Picard and recreate him. They need to combine him with Jack, who has this aromatic syndrome. That's my guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a bit of a surmise, really, in the same way that Picard, Geordi, and Beverly did as well. We get a bit more clarity from Data, but it's almost Lore just takes over before you can get a real full explanation for it.
Because what else would the anomalous form inside Picard be? Is there somebody else driving Picard inside? Is there a tiny little micro cosm inside that's been controlling Picard? Yeah. I have no idea what else it could mean, but that's the only thing that makes sense of what Lore was saying about the perfectly imperfect Picard. It's like he's different to all other species because he has this anomaly inside him that can't be replicated by the changelings. So that's why they need Jack. I think that's what they're saying there, but it was a really interesting discussion that was going on. I know you talked a lot about it earlier on as well, but that was my big moment from the episode, the big reveal of what's happening there.
Excellent stuff. I think...
And I was right as well. So I always like to point out that occasionally I do get things right on the podcast.
Excellent stuff. Any points, Easter eggs, or notes that you want to include before we round up?
Yeah, just a note. Since I got something right, I might as well mention something I got wrong, or at least came across wrong in a previous episode. Thanks to those of you who pointed this out. I was talking about the changelings from Deep Space Nine earlier on in the season, and I think it just came across incorrectly what I was saying. The changelings lived on the other side of the wormhole from DS9. And I think for some weird reason I said they lived in the wormhole, but the beings that lived inside the wormhole were the prophets, who were worshipped by the Bajorans on this side of the wormhole. I know that. Yeah. I do know that. And the changelings and the founders are the group on the other side of the wormhole. So for some reason, I think I misspoke, or I said it really quickly while one of you guys was trying to jump in and get another point in. Maybe
probably.
So that's probably what happened. Yes. But yes, I'm aware changelings are from the Gamma Quadrant on the other side of that wormhole, and the prophets are inside. And I believe that is where Captain Sisko is, with the prophets, not with the changelings. Of course, why would he be with the changelings? Makes no sense.
Excellent stuff.
So that's my correction for this episode. I'm sure I'll have a few more of those as the season goes on.
I'm sure. I just have 2 points. One is Vadic says to Beverly, do you know about Jack's physiology as well? Posing the question.
Yes.
And I love that Vadic follows this up as Beverly retorts, well, he's not meant for you. And she again says to Beverly, but he was never meant for you either. And it kind of, the second note links back to, where Vadic is having, I say conversation, but she's being ordered really by the form, or the changeling form. But it is the question of whether he is a changeling or is something else, because he does say to her, you must find the boy. Effectively, it's imperative, because he says, or your kind will find your reasons for existence meaningless as well. It's the use of your kind.
Yes.
So, I mean, he looks like a changeling here, in terms of how it comes across, but that might just be simply because Vadic is using her own hand and part of her limbs to set up this communication, but it could be just something else. And I'm like, so
it feels like it's another species.
Yeah. So this is really kind of intriguing, and maybe something more connected with why Jack is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think more my takeaway from that conversation is much more Beverly's clearly a changeling, is what that sounds like. That they've replaced Beverly, and she's the one that's been brought here by Jack. So it almost sounded like Vadic was saying to Beverly, he's not yours because we put you alongside him so that you could get on board this ship. That's what it almost sounded like to me. So remember what I was saying earlier on when you were talking about the new abilities we hear from Jack, that he's able to read minds. He's hearing somebody speak to him. Earlier on in the season, when we heard that we heard Beverly speaking to Jack saying, "Come back to me." Why would Beverly be saying that if he's reading her mind? Why would Beverly aboard the ship be saying that to Jack? That seems weird. But if Beverly is trapped somewhere, the actual Beverly is trapped somewhere, maybe she's calling out to Jack. Similar to what we heard about Tuvok being tortured and Riker being tortured, maybe Beverly has also been kidnapped.
Absolutely. So lots of theories and intrigue here. A lot to be clarified as well. So yeah, good stuff. 3
more episodes to go to find out what's going on. Excellent. I think that's it for our points and notes.
But then overall, Derek, what did you think of Star Trek Picard Episode 7, Dominion?
I like this one. That we're at the point, as I said, there's only 3 episodes to go in the season, so we're at that point where we need an episode that is a lot of exposition about what's going on, to kind of talk about the motivations of the characters, to set us up on this path for the last couple of episodes. The first time I watched it wasn't as good as the rest of the episodes so far this season, but the second time I watched it, I think the intrigue that's being laid out felt much better to me. So yeah, I think it's a really necessary episode. You have to have episodes like this, but not the best episode of the season. So some interesting reveals, but you'll have to see next episode to find out what those reveals really mean. So so an important episode, but not the best and most exciting episode of the season so far for me. How about yourself, John?
Yeah, I mean, similar kind of views as yourself. I mean, I think this is a real intrigue episode, actually, and I kind of really connected in with that much more the second time I watched this episode. I think it was just really kind of good around that. Certainly, as I mentioned, around Beverly, Picard, and Vadic's conversation, but also a bit more with Jack Crusher, a bit more with Vadic's master that we see, whoever that is, what it is. Loads of intrigue around that, as well as, seeing Tuvok being a changeling, the ambiguity around whether he is being held, same with Janeway, same with Will Riker, possibly with Beverly, as a new theory that we're throwing out there. So this has huge amounts of intrigue. So I kind of give this 4 data configurations out of 5. And I just loved the introduction of chaotic law into this as well, and just how Brent Spiner can sort of flip between these two characters. Very cool. Same as Tuvok as well. It was great to see Tuvok. Really enjoyed that. So, I'm really hoping they go full in on the premise of that final line from Vadic is, that we learn who Jack truly is in the next episode. So, I'd give this 4 data configurations out of 5. Excellent. I had a number of things. I was trustless Tuvoks or split personalities. I just didn't know.
Yeah, no, I like data configurations. That's quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. I'm really intrigued with the idea that we'll get a moment at the end of the series where it's loads of cages with every single member of Starfleet that we know from Voyager and from DS9 and from Next Generation, all trapped at the end of the season.
Yeah.
That'd be a cool visual, wouldn't it?
It certainly would.
But I'm not holding out hope that they're going to be doing something like that. But anyway, good stuff. Yeah, looking forward to the next episode then.
Excellent stuff. Let us move into our feedback section from our fellow Trekkies. First up from Facebook, we have Victor Von Doom, who says, very anxious to see how our heroes get out of this one. The writers, directors, and producers sure know how to wring out every ounce of emotion from their audience. To quote a saying from The Hood, Vadic gotta go.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, Victor. Vadic does gotta go.
Yeah, really does. Thanks, Victor. Although I would say I think Vadic, I love just getting the additional information and background and the reveal around her. So whether that injects a bit of sympathy to the character, who knows, but she is singularly determined on the destruction of the human race here.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks, Victor. Joe Herbers says, a weak episode for the season, just too much exposition. Some great character moments, though lacked several main characters that we should have expected in this episode. Now, it's really obvious that Starfleet putting the data hybrid thing in charge of Daystrom security made no sense to me. I don't normally pay much attention to background music, but it was distracting at times in this episode. It was great to see Tuvok, though, but how long did they have to torture him to get so many details of his relationship with Seven that the Changeling could remember a random one that she asks? I think it would have worked better if he was the one asking or giving info to show he was real, and then she figures out that he's not.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, Joe. That if they have been sort of extracting information over a long time, with torture, interrogation, by, from a captured Tuvok. Mm-hmm. So, really, I can see that being equally, as good here for sure. And I think you're right. I think first watching this, I just wasn't entirely sure about this episode. I felt it did drop a bit of momentum. I think having watched it a few more times, I think the exposition, it is heavy. I do think at least for me, I think it's done in a really kind of good way. Yeah. I guess it's just, a matter of perspective there on that. But, really glad though that you, enjoyed the return of Tuvok, even though it was, brief.
Yes, it was, but good to see Tim Russ back. Thanks so much, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Heather Wallace says, did anyone on the Titan bother to try and rescue Will while Vadik et al. Were off-site? I thought that was the point of the plan, but instead Jean-Luc and Beverly just let Vadik rant on. It really annoyed me how Picard cut in as soon as Beverly asked a question and didn't wait for an answer. That's not how you interrogate someone, Jean-Luc. Also, can pop culture please stop using a nursery rhyme sung whistled slowly to make it creepy? I feel it reached peak use with my boy Zemo's Bar Bar Black Sheep on Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The not Tuvok reveal had the biggest emotional punch of the whole episode for me. I was really upset it wasn't him. I do like that Seven and Shaw have embraced fugitive life by swapping the Starfleet uniforms for leather outfits.
Back to her traditional outfit.
Yes, Rebels.
Earlier on in the season, earlier on in Picard, yeah, good stuff. On the nursery rhyme thing, it is becoming a bit of a trope that we see in lots of pop culture shows. Here, I think it was Three Blind Mice at the beginning of the episode, and then we hear Vadik whistling it later on in the episode. So, Three Blind Mice. See how they run. Yeah, so
I still quite like it, to be honest. Yeah. I think that's just me, because I think children's tales generally are creepy. I mean, if you think of Roald Dahl, or if you think of the Brothers Grimm or whatever, they are pretty grim.
They're usually based in something pretty creepy,
it is to try and scare the bejesus out of kids into sort of walking the line, I guess. So
Three Blind Mice was cutting
to
off their tails with a carving knife. So that's pretty creepy in itself, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
Thanks so much for your thoughts on this, Heather. I think, didn't they damage the ship so that they couldn't move? I didn't think the plan was to actually go and rescue Will. It was to attract Vadik there, capture them all, and when they're captured, then they would go and search their ship for Will. But
yes, that's
because
what
they didn't stay captured long enough, I think, was the challenge, because of Lore releasing them all pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought it, but yeah. I mean, I guess maybe there needed to be a bit more explanation, possibly when Jean-Luc has that kind of revelatory moment with Jack, where he says maybe we do have the advantage, because I didn't quite understand where the advantage actually lay here. Yeah. Because you're inviting Dracula into the home, effectively, which may or may not turn out well. There's still a 50-50 chance here.
That's true.
No matter how good the plan might be.
I do think that's actually a benefit to this episode, personally. I do think the idea that our heroes made a plan to trap them, and then it flipped and they ended up losing their ship to Vadik by the end of the episode. I think that's an interesting choice, something that's not done very often, especially with these characters, these self-proclaimed heroes.
Vomit spewing, exactly.
Yes. So let's see how it plays out for the other 3 episodes. Thanks so much for all your feedback.
Yeah, thanks so much, fellow Trekkies, for the feedback. Really good to get your thoughts. But I think with that, we are heading over to 10 forward for the pub quiz.
Yeah, I think we are. We're on to our 7th question for our 10 forward pub quiz. John, do you want to give the 7th question?
Yes. Why would a Vulcan never go to Acklion's 7, according to 7 of 9?
I almost gave out the answer to this question earlier on in the episode. I almost fell into my trap of
I know,
writing
really
a question
difficult.
and then giving the answer in the podcast. So I didn't do it this time, but it is in the episode, of course. John, do you want to repeat the question one more time?
Yes. Question 7. Why would a Vulcan never go to Acklion's 7, according to 7 of 9?
Lots of 7s in there, including, of course, the question 7. As we say, that is the 7th question of our 10 questions. So gather them all together. Email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with all the correct answers for the 10 questions. And you could be in with a chance of getting your hands on some Star Trek Picard goodies.
Yes. Thank you so much, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, for joining us. That wraps up our 7th episode discussing Star Trek Picard for season 3. We, of course, hope you stay subscribed to the podcast. And, of course, if you enjoy what you hear, why not rate us, review us, or indeed share it with your friends, family, and other changelings, because sharing the podcast is, of course,
Sharing the love.
Sharing the love,
Yeah.
indeed. You can also support us over on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries or buymeacoffee.com/TVPI. But we will be back next week with Star Trek Season 3, Episode 8. You'll be surprised to hear. Surrender. Your feedback on Episode 8 is absolutely welcome for our feedback section. And of course, we will have the next question in our 10 forward pub quiz. So please make sure you join us.
Absolutely, yeah. Looking forward to chatting about episode 8 when it comes out. We are in an intriguing position at the moment where we're going away on holidays on the 19th of April, and the last episode of Star Trek Picard comes out on the 20th.
Yes.
Paramount have been very kind to give us previews of the episodes, which has allowed us to cover this alongside the other 2 shows that we're covering. But of course, we don't have the finale available to us just yet. So we will try everything we can to cover the last episode of Star Trek Picard before we go on holidays.
Yes, and in good time, but there may be a delay for the last episode, which is slightly annoying for us.
It's a little bit, especially because if we go on holidays, we absolutely are not recording a podcast this time. We have in the past brought our podcast gear with us, but we won't be able to do that for Picard. So there may be a delay, but we'll try everything we can to avoid that.
Yes, exactly.
So thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll be here for all 10 episodes of Picard, and we'll see you again next week.
Yes, thank you so much, fellow Trekkies and Trekkers, for joining us. It is a pleasure, as always, discussing all things Star Trek with you. In the meantime, however, keep watching, keep listening, and keep trekking.
Bye.
Bye.